What happens when your family betrays you and you're left to reclaim everything you once believed was yours? Grace Collins thought she had it all together. After losing her mother, she inherited the family bakery and the house that symbolized love and legacy. But when she returned home from college, she found everything had changed. Her father and stepmother now claimed ownership of the house, shattering her world. Now Grace faces a tough decision. Will she let lies and betrayal define her, or will she take control and rebuild everything from the ground up? Stay tuned to see how Grace fights to take back what's rightfully hers. And don't forget to subscribe for more empowering stories. My name is Grace Collins and I'm 25 years old. I recently graduated from the University of California with a degree in fine arts. Life as a new graduate comes with its share of struggles, but my story is much more than just the usual challenges of adulthood. It's about legacy, betrayal, and the strength I had to summon when everything seemed to fall apart. Growing up, my mother, Rose Collins, was the pillar of my world. A gifted chef and business owner, she was not only an incredible cook but also a meticulous planner. She built her life with purpose, ensuring I always had a safety net, a sense of stability that would help me weather any storm. Even before her battle with cancer, she had secured our futures. One of her most cherished accomplishments was the family bakery, a business she built from scratch, pouring all her energy into its success. When she passed away 4 years ago, she left me the bakery as a piece of her that would never fade. "Grace, this bakery is more than just a business," she would say. "It's our home, our roots. You'll always have a place to call yours even when I'm gone." Even in her final moments, she focused on preparing me for life without her. She taught me everything I needed to know about the business, from managing staff to handling suppliers. It was her final act of love, and it's something I carry with me every day. But life wasn't always easy. My parents' marriage lasted only a decade before it fell apart. I was just a child when my father, Walter Collins, decided to leave us for someone else. There were no dramatic arguments, no courtroom battles, just a quiet goodbye. He quickly moved on, marrying Brittany, a younger woman who slipped into the role of wife and mother with ease. Their daughter Lily came soon after, and though I visited occasionally, I never truly felt like part of their new family. Brittany was always polite but distant, like the kind of stepmother who made you feel like an outsider in your own home. "Grace, would you like to stay for dinner?" she would ask, her tone barely hiding the hope that I'd decline. Meanwhile, Dad worked long hours, claiming he needed to provide for his family. But it seemed that didn't include me. Lily, my half-sister, was 10 years younger and the apple of their eye. I watched as Brittany pampered her, braiding her hair, praising every little accomplishment, and it was hard not to feel like I didn't belong. Despite the distance, my relationship with my father remained cordial. He paid for my college education in a lump sum, perhaps out of guilt or obligation. It was his way of staying involved without really being there. I accepted it, thinking it was the best I could expect from him. Little did I know that my mother's careful plans, combined with my father's hidden motives, would soon set the stage for a storm I never saw coming. Losing my mother was the hardest thing I've ever faced. Rose Collins wasn't just my mom. She was my anchor, my cheerleader, the one person who made me feel like I could conquer the world. When she passed away from cancer 4 years ago, just weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, my entire world shattered. The grief was suffocating. It felt like a part of me was ripped away. For a long time I could barely get out of bed. In the first few weeks I was numb, struggling to even process the reality of her death. That's when my father, Walter Collins, stepped in a way I didn't expect. He, along with Brittany and Lily, temporarily moved into the house to support me. At the time, I was too overwhelmed by loss to question it. I was just grateful for anyone's presence, even if our relationships had always been strained. "We're here for you, Grace," my dad said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. Brittany nodded in agreement, her face carefully arranged to look sympathetic. Even Lily, my half-sister, seemed to go out of her way to be kind. Though her curious eyes wandered through the house as though exploring a museum, I appreciated the gesture. At first, their presence provided some relief. Brittany took charge of organizing meals and managing the house while Dad helped with the overwhelming paperwork that comes with losing a loved one. Lily would sit with me talking about school and her friends, offering small distractions from my grief. It felt strange, but in those moments almost comforting. As summer came to an end and my college start date loomed, I faced a difficult decision: what to do with the house. Selling it was unthinkable. It was my mother's legacy, the place she'd worked so hard to secure for us. But leaving it empty for 4 years didn't seem like a smart choice either. That's when Dad came to me with a proposal. "Grace," he said one morning over coffee, "why don't we stay here while you're at school? We'll cover all the bills, maintain the place, and you won't have to worry about a thing." Brittany, flipping pancakes at the stove, chimed in, "It would be good for everyone. Lily loves her school here and the house will be in good hands." At the time it seemed like a practical solution. I agreed, grateful for the offer, and left for college with the assurance that my mother's house and her memory would be carried on. "What do you mean I live here?" I asked, my eyes scanning the living room. It looked slightly different than how I had left it. A new furniture arrangement, a different rug. Nothing too drastic, but everything felt off. Why were the locks changed? Before Brittany could respond, Dad appeared from the living room, his face pale, movements stiff. Lily followed him, looking nervous but silent. "Grace," Dad started, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign that he was uncomfortable. "Let's talk in the office for a minute." Alarm bells went off in my head as I followed him into the small office that had once belonged to Mom. The walls were still lined with her books and certificates, but the air felt heavy, as if the room itself knew something was wrong. Dad closed the door behind us, turning to face me, his hands shaking slightly. "Grace," he began, his voice low, "there's something I need to tell you." He paused, and I could see how the weight of his words pressed down on him. "Brittany. Brittany thinks this house belongs to me." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Mom left this house to me. It's in her will." Dad nodded, avoiding my gaze. "I know that, but when we moved in, I told Brittany it was mine, that I had given it to your mom out of kindness after the divorce, and that when she passed, it came back to me." The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. "You lied to her for 4 years? You let her believe this was your house, and now you're telling me she doesn't even know it's mine?" Dad's shoulders slumped. "I didn't think it would matter. You were at college and we needed a place to stay. I thought it would be temporary." Anger and disbelief surged through me. "Temporary? This is my house, Dad. Mom's house. And you're telling me you've been living here, letting Brittany act like it's hers, while you lied to both of us." "I was going to tell her the truth," he said weakly, but his words felt hollow. "Just give me some time to figure out how to handle this." I shook my head, furious. "You've already had 4 years, Dad." At that moment, Brittany knocked on the door, her voice sharp. "Is everything okay in there?" The tension was suffocating, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them continue this charade. The first few days back in the house were awkward, but I convinced myself that things would improve after the confrontation with my father. I decided to stay quiet, hoping he would resolve the situation as promised. However, the atmosphere in the house shifted almost immediately, and Brittany's behavior took a sharp turn for the worse. It started with small things, comments that seemed polite on the surface but were laced with subtle jabs. "Grace, I reorganized the pantry for efficiency. You probably didn't notice since you've been so busy with college," she'd say, smiling too sweetly. Then there were the accidents. One morning I found my favorite blouse in the laundry ruined with bright pink streaks. "Oh dear," Brittany exclaimed when I confronted her, her tone dripping with mock concern. "I must have mixed up the laundry baskets. These things happen when a house gets too crowded." Lily, who had once been eager to spend time with me, now seemed distant and aloof. She would roll her eyes whenever I entered the room and started referring to me as "that girl." during her loud phone conversations with friends. "Mom says it's weird you're still here," I overheard her whispering one evening. The words stung more than I expected. Brittany's passive-aggressive jabs soon escalated into outright hostility. One evening, as I poured myself a cup of coffee, she cornered me in the kitchen, arms crossed, her expression icy. "Grace, have you thought about getting your own place?" she asked, her tone casual but her words pointed. "You're starting a new job soon. It's time to think about living independently. You're a grown woman after all." I clenched the mug in my hands, forcing myself to stay calm. "Actually, I've talked to Dad about staying here for a while. He's fine with it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment I thought she might argue, but instead she turned and left the kitchen without another word. Her actions spoke louder than anything she could have said. The next morning I woke up to find the living room rearranged. My mother's favorite vase had been shoved into a dusty corner shelf. It didn't match the new aesthetic. "It's just a new look," Brittany said when I confronted her, her tone too casual as if it were nothing. My frustration simmered beneath the surface, but I bit my tongue, knowing that any argument would only make things worse. The tension in the house became suffocating. Brittany had made it clear that I wasn't welcome, and Lily followed her lead, treating me with open disdain. Even Dad, who had always been my safety net, seemed distant. He avoided my gaze, his face drawn with tension. He left early each morning, claiming work obligations, but I could tell he was avoiding me. I was becoming a stranger in my own home. Family dinners, once a comforting routine, turned into a battlefield. Subtle digs, uncomfortable silences. Brittany would cook just enough food for 3 people, then feign surprise when I joined them at the table. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be here for dinner," she would say, her tone light but her eyes cold as ice. Lily giggled at her mother's remarks, and Dad would sit quietly as though he were invisible, avoiding confrontation at all costs. As the days passed, the isolation wore on me. I retreated to my room more often, trying to avoid the hostility that seemed to follow me around the house. But even there I couldn't escape the suffocating sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about Brittany anymore. It was about my father, the man who had always stood by, silently complicit as his wife chipped away at my sense of belonging. I tried to focus on my new job, reconnecting with old friends, anything to distract myself, but the weight of the tension in the house was inescapable. Each day the cracks in our fragile family dynamic grew deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed out of my own life. Saturday morning arrived unusually quiet. No sounds of Brittany's weekend baking in the kitchen, no music blaring from Lily's room, no faint murmur of the TV where Dad usually watched sports. The silence was unsettling, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs, calling out softly, "Hello? Brittany? Dad?" But there was no response. The kitchen was spotless and used since the night before. The living room was untouched, throw pillows arranged perfectly on the couch, even the usual clutter by the entryway, Lily's shoes, Brittany's handbag, was gone. A quick glance outside confirmed it. Dad's car wasn't in the driveway. Confused, I checked my phone, expecting a text or note explaining their absence, but there was nothing. I dialed Dad's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Frowning, I tried again a few more times before reluctantly calling Brittany. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice sharp and impatient. "What do you want, Grace?" she snapped. I could hear waves and tropical music faintly in the background. "I just wanted to know where everyone is," I said, caught off guard by her tone. "I woke up and the house was empty." She laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh I had grown used to. It was cruel, cutting. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Maldives, first-class flights, luxury resort, the works." Her voice dripped with mockery. "We didn't mention it because, frankly, we didn't want you tagging along and expecting us to pay for you." "What?" I stammered, my disbelief mixing with anger. "Brittany, what are you talking about? You left without saying anything." "Save it," she cut me off coldly. I'm done with this whole situation. You're nothing but a freeloader living in our house, mooching off us like you own the place. Your father might tolerate it, but I won't. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a grown woman squatting in her own home?" Her words struck like a slap, but she wasn't finished. "When we get back, I want you gone. Pack your things and leave, Grace. And don't think you can guilt your father into letting you stay. He agrees with me. He's just too spineless to tell you himself. We've already blocked your number. Have a nice life." The line went dead before I could respond. For a long moment I stood there, the phone trembling in my hand. Her words echoed in my mind, and the weight of the betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. I had been pushed out, discarded, rejected by the people I had always considered my family. And now, not only had they stolen my place in their lives, but they were making it clear they didn't even care. But then something inside me shifted. The sadness and disbelief gave way to white-hot, focused anger. This was my house. My mother's house. And I was done playing nice. I spent the rest of the day packing their belongings with a determination I didn't know I had. Brittany's expensive clothes, Lily's school supplies, Dad's golf clubs. It all went into boxes and suitcases, neatly stacked in the garage. I made sure not a single trace of them remained in the house. Each move felt cathartic, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself with every item I packed away. By evening I had called a locksmith. "Can you change the locks immediately?" asked my voice firm. He arrived within the hour, replacing every lock in the house while I stood by, clutching the new keys like a lifeline. It cost a small fortune, but I didn't care. As I closed the door behind him, I knew I had reclaimed my home. I felt an unexpected sense of calm wash over me. This was my house once again, and no one would take it from me. Friday evening, after a long day at work, I pulled into the driveway and immediately spotted their car. They had returned. Brittany, Dad, and Lily stood near the front steps, surrounded by their suitcases and boxes from the garage. Brittany's face was flushed with anger, her hands gesturing wildly as she spoke to Dad. Lily hung back, her expression scowling, while Dad wore his usual quiet discomfort. As soon as I stepped out of my car, Brittany's voice cut through the air. "How dare you change the locks?" she shouted, storming toward me. "This is our house. You have no right to lock us out." I ignored her rant, walking calmly past them toward the front door. Brittany followed closely, her voice rising with each step. "This is breaking and entering. We're calling the police. You think you can just throw us out like we're nothing?" I stopped at the door, turned, and faced her. Something within me felt calm and steady, even as her words were venomous. "No, Brittany," I said firmly. "This isn't your house. It never was. This house belongs to me. My mother left it to me in her will. The only reason you've been living here is because I allowed it, and now I'm done." Her face twisted in disbelief. She turned to Dad, who stood frozen near the car. "Walter, tell her she's lying. Tell her this is our house," she demanded, her voice shrill. Dad looked like he wanted to vanish into the ground, avoiding my gaze as he shifted uncomfortably before finally mumbling, "She's telling the truth." Brittany's fury reached its peak. "You lied to me," she shrieked, glaring at Dad. "You let me think this was your house, that you were doing us a favor by letting her stay. What else haven't you told me?" Her attention snapped back to me, her expression now a mix of anger and desperation. "Grace, sweetheart," she began, her tone suddenly sickly sweet. "We've had so many good times here, holiday dinners, book club nights. This is a family home. Surely we can work something out." "No," I interrupted, cutting her off. "We can't. Your things are in the garage. Take them and leave." Brittany's mask cracked, and her tone turned venomous once again. "You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You'd throw your own family out on the streets." "You've never treated me like family," I shot back, my voice steady yet firm. "And don't pretend this is about loyalty. You tried to steal my house, Brittany. My mother's house." Dad stepped forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "Grace, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family. We can figure this out. Just let us stay a little longer." I shook my head, locking eyes with him, my resolve hardening. "No, Dad. You lied to her. You lied to me. You let her erase every trace of Mom from this house while you stood by and did nothing. I won't let you keep doing this." Brittany tried one last time, her voice rising with a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't do this. We'll fight you on this." I opened the door and stepped inside, turning to face them one last time. "You're welcome to try," I said, my voice calm but final. I closed the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched them argue as they packed the last of their things into the car. Brittany screamed, Lily cried, and Dad stood there, defeated. As the car pulled away, something heavy lifted from my chest. The house was finally mine again. Truly mine. In the days that followed, the house felt strangely quiet. But the silence brought an unexpected peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, bracing for Brittany's passive-aggressive comments. The space was mine again, and with it came a clarity I hadn't felt in so long. This wasn't just my mother's house anymore. It was my sanctuary. My fresh start. Cutting ties with my father and his family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Dad tried reaching out, calling from new numbers, leaving voicemail after voicemail full of apologies and promises to fix things. I didn't answer. His words felt hollow, empty, after everything he had allowed to happen. "I love you, Grace," he said in one message. I was just trying to keep the peace. But peace built on lies isn't peace at all, and I wasn't willing to compromise my dignity for his comfort anymore. Brittany didn't even bother trying to contact me. She had made her feelings crystal clear. Lily's silence, however, stung more than I expected. But I reminded myself she was still young, caught in the middle of decisions she had no control over. Even so, I knew it was better to let go of the toxic ties that had held me back for so long. With them gone, I focused on rebuilding my life. The first step was reclaiming the house, not just physically but emotionally. I rearranged the furniture back to the way my mother had it, repainting the walls in soft, warm tones that reminded me of her. I replanted the rose bushes in the garden, choosing the same color she had loved. Each small change felt like a step toward honoring her memory while making the space my own. Work became my anchor. My job at Marshall & Brooks Financial was challenging but fulfilling, and I threw myself into it wholeheartedly. My colleagues became friends, and for the first time I felt like I was part of a community. Hazel from the risk assessment team became my confidant. Our lunch breaks were filled with laughter, planning, and talk of the future. But the most meaningful project I undertook was restoring my mother's bakery, which had been closed since her passing. It took months of planning, late nights, and a lot of sweat, but eventually the doors reopened. The first time I stepped behind the counter, the scent of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. I felt a surge of pride and connection to her. The bakery wasn't just a business. It was her legacy, and now it was mine to carry forward. In the quiet moments, I often thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss of the people I had once called family. But I didn't dwell on it with bitterness. Instead, I saw it as a chapter in my story, one that taught me the importance of boundaries, self-respect, and the power of starting over. Healing isn't linear and it isn't easy, but standing in my mother's house, surrounded by the life I was rebuilding, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. My mother had always believed in planning for the future, and now I understood why. She had given me the tools to stand on my own, even when the people I trusted most let me down. As I looked out at the garden, the roses blooming in the evening light, I knew I was ready to move forward. This house, this life was mine. And I would build it into something beautiful. For her, for me, and for the future she always wanted me to have. What do you do when the people you once called family betray you so deeply that even the home you grew up in becomes a battleground? When your father, the one person who should have protected you, chooses silence and lies over standing by you? Grace thought she had found peace after her mother's death, believing that her father and Brittany's family were finally starting to accept her. For years they made it seem like a happy, functioning family. But the moment she returned home after graduation, everything shattered. She learned that the house she thought was hers, her mother's legacy, had been lied about, claimed by her father as his, and let Brittany assume it was hers. But Grace, with all her pain and betrayal, made a decision. She took back what was hers, not just the house but her sense of self. She reclaimed the home her mother had worked so hard for, and with it she reclaimed her life. No more lies. No more manipulation. And when Brittany tried to fight back, it was too late. The damage was done and Grace was done. Now Grace is moving forward, starting fresh, focusing on her career and restoring her mother's bakery. She's healing, not just from the loss of her family, but from the realization that family isn't always about blood. It's about respect, honesty, and the boundaries we set to protect ourselves. So here's the question. If you were in Grace's shoes, would you have walked away sooner, or would you have kept fighting for the family you once knew? Let's talk about it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.